Going on, Badger fans? Thanks for joining me today. We are back from the bye week. Took off last week from the live chat and our podcast and a lot of other things. It was nice to get a little break, but also happy to be back talking Badger football again prior to the Northwestern game this weekend at Camp Randall. No, that's not nice. Blocked. If you guys got any questions about the Badgers, just put them in the comment box, and I will do my best to answer them. We did post the latest edition of our podcast this morning. George Hill visiting. I don't know anything about that. It's hard for me to keep up with visits during the season and all that when I'm as busy as I am with the team. So a lot of the recruiting sites will have that information probably. So you'll have to check there. But yeah, we posted the Red Zone podcast this morning. We talked to Teddy Greenstein from the Chicago Tribune and talked about the Northwestern game and the Big Ten and all that. So check that out on iTunes. Subscribe to the podcast if you enjoy listening to that. And I thought it was a pretty good one. Someone asked if Clement's career at UW could actually be over. Well, yeah, I mean, definitely could be. There's only, if you include the bowl game, there's 3 games left in the season. It's not looking good for his status of playing this game, and just the vibe I'm getting is that it's just a bad vibe. When I talked to Joe Rudolph yesterday, and he said, he said he's progressing, whatever that means, and just the kind of the attitude surrounding it makes me think, at least for this week, it's not a very positive sign, and it just wouldn't surprise me if he just decides to go ahead and shut it down for the rest of the season, and obviously with 3 games left, if he gets through those and doesn't play, then he's got the option of trying to go to the NFL after this season, and obviously his stock hurts from not playing much this season, playing 2 games, but he put a lot of good tape on, he put a lot of good stuff on film last year, backing up Melvin Gordon behind a better offensive line. And then, you could see in that Rutgers game, even when he wasn't 100%, what he's able to do. So, based on what he's done in the past, and based on maybe his, if he wants to, go to Wisconsin's Pro Day and then the NFL Combine, maybe he can up his stock that way. I think it's a little bit of a risk for him, I guess, it seems like a little bit of a risk each way, doesn't it? I mean, he could go to the NFL right now, get picked lower than he would probably if he stayed an extra year, but, obviously he gets paid for an extra year. The shelf life of a running back is pretty short. But then there's the risk of, coming back, and if he suffers an injury again next year, then he's got the injury-prone label on him. He doesn't have another year to come back and try to impress scouts again. So if he thinks he'll get drafted in the mid-rounds, I would guess that he's going to go ahead and leave after this season. But we'll just have to wait and see. I mean, I'm not really an expert when it comes to predicting where guys will get drafted and what NFL scouts think of certain players. I think Clement's extremely talented, and I think a lot of teams may look at his tape, from last year and then that Rutgers game and think, this is a talented guy. I know he hasn't played a whole lot this year, but he's worth a 3rd, 4th round pick or whatever it is. And if that's the case, he could be gone. So yeah, I mean, I think it's possible that Clement's UW career is over, but it's also possible that he ends up playing, to finish off this season. It's kind of impossible to tell at this point, but we'll just have to kind of wait and see. They're not going to tell us anything. We'll just have to wait and see each Saturday whether he goes out there or not. So they're going to keep it on the down low. And as far as we know, he didn't practice, or at least very limited in practice yesterday. And that's not a good sign when Paul Chris said on Monday that he expected him to be a full participant. So again, it's kind of impossible to predict, but I wouldn't be really surprised by anything. Guys got anything else for me? This game is Senior Day on Saturday against Northwestern. I am going to have a story in Saturday's paper that I think will be pretty interesting on just talking to some of the seniors this week about kind of everything they've gone through during their career. Obviously, they started their career with Brett Bielema as their coach, went through two different coaching changes, won a Big Ten title early on, and then the only time they've been back there is when they got blown out by Ohio State, that 59-0 embarrassment right before Gary Anderson left. So a lot of ups and downs for this senior class, and it looks like they're not going to be able to make it back to Indy unless Iowa really messes up these last two games. But I think it'll be an interesting story talking to some of those guys in Saturday's paper, so make sure you check that out. And Thursday online, we'll bring back our Badgers football film room piece. Obviously, without a game last week, the couple of those we kind of took off because there wasn't a game to kind of look at. But we're going to be looking at Northwestern's defense a little bit on Thursday on madison.com, and we're going to take a look at how good they got a couple really good cover corners. Northwestern is tied for the best team in the country in terms of allowing deep balls. They've only allowed one pass this season of 40 yards or more. And that's going to make it difficult, especially if Clement's not playing like we just talked about. If we have, if those two guys are locking down the outside, and especially if Erickson, can't get open very easily, it's going to be a lot easier for Northwestern to kind of stick that extra guy in the box. And if Clement's not there to carry the ball, it could be a rough game offensively for Wisconsin. So we're going to break down the film and look at those two cornerbacks and the Wildcats front seven, and kind of look at why this could be a tough game for Wisconsin, especially if Clement doesn't play. I do think it's going to be a low-scoring game for sure on Saturday. Now that I'm thinking Clement's probably not going to play, I'd probably go somewhere in the neighborhood of, I think Wisconsin will still win, but I think it's going to be a really close game, maybe like a 13-10, 17-13, one of those type of really low-scoring games. So this is definitely a losable game for Wisconsin. Northwestern's a pretty good team. The home team has won 8 straight in this series, so they do have that advantage of being at Camp Randall. But Northwestern's a good enough team to win this game, and this is some huge bowl implications here. I know Wisconsin probably can't make it back to Indy, but if Northwestern wins this and finishes with a better record, that could be the difference between the Holiday Bowl and San Diego, which is a pretty prestigious bowl right after the Florida Bowls, and then maybe playing in a place like Nashville for the Music City Bowl or something like that. So a really big game for Wisconsin, regardless of what Iowa does, I think. And I think this will probably, even though they're at home, this could be a tougher game than Minnesota next week. You guys got any other questions for me? You got any predictions for the game? I just threw out kind of how I thought it would go down. You guys got any score predictions of your own? Or any questions about the Big Ten too? We can talk about the Big Ten or the college football playoff rankings, or kind of anything you guys want to go over. Let's see. Who am I? I am the Badgers football beat writer for the Wisconsin State Journal here in Madison, so I'm a reporter who covers the team. So, rumors about filling coaching vacancies. I'm not sure which, vacancies you're talking about. I haven't heard anything. I'm not on the inside of any of the other teams besides Wisconsin, really. So it's hard for me to say. Obviously, the obvious coaching candidates are out there, and they've been thrown out there, and I think I can't give you a definitive either way. I mean, I think Dave Aranda is a guy that that's probably what most Badger fans are interested in, whether Dave Aranda is going to stay or not. I think he'll be a candidate for a lot of these openings, whether it's a D coordinator at a prestigious school or the NFL, or maybe even some of these Big Ten head coaching jobs. He may be up for those type of things. And we talked to him a couple weeks ago, and he said, being a head coach is something I didn't really think I would want to do, but he said, now looking at it now, maybe one day he will want to be a head coach. He said that's a long way down the road, but he was probably just saying that because he doesn't want to talk about it in the middle of the season. So it'll be interesting to see if he interviews for any of these jobs or anything like that. As far as the other candidates that are being thrown out there, I can't really give any insight into that. Really, I'm not really on the inside of that. Hard to resist the cash. Yeah, I think it is. Dave Aranda, I know he loves it here at Wisconsin. I know his family loves it here. But, if someone comes in and offers him, twice as much as he's making now, I think that's really hard for anybody to turn down. So, for a head coaching job, probably even more than twice as much as he's making now. So, I definitely wouldn't be surprised. I've said before, I wouldn't be surprised if Dave Aranda was gone after this season. And I also wouldn't, because he likes it so much here, I wouldn't really wouldn't be that surprised if he stayed for another 4 or 5 more years. So it's just kind of he'll have opportunities. It just comes down to a matter of him deciding whether it's worth it to leave for the money or just the better job, or whether he wants to be a head coach yet or remain a defensive coordinator. So I think he'll have some opportunities. It's just a matter of if he acts on them or not. Don't be afraid to throw your questions out there, guys. I'm going to tweet out our link here to get some more people in the chat. Will Barry pay him better? That's a good question. I think he'll pay him. I think if he's up for some of these other jobs, I think you could see Aranda get a raise here at Wisconsin. I don't think he's going to go crazy. I don't think he can. I don't think Wisconsin can really match what some other, bigger job, like a head coaching job somewhere else. Wisconsin wouldn't be able to match that kind of money. But, if he's kind of on the fence about leaving, I do think, Aranda's been such an impact, made such an impact here, on the defense, and the fact that they're playing so well, I think, I think he will give him a raise if that's the difference between, him staying and not. I think he can bump up his salary a little bit. And that's something I think we could see this offseason. Someone said, can Purdue shock the world for us? Obviously Iowa's playing Purdue this week, and Iowa has to lose to Purdue at home and then lose at Nebraska next week for Wisconsin to have any chance. No, I hate to say that I don't think Purdue is good enough to beat Iowa, especially at Iowa. I've seen Purdue. Purdue played Northwestern close last week. They played well in stretches this season, but they're just not quite on the talent level of an Iowa, and they just don't have nearly as good of a team. I think for Iowa to have given up this lead in the division, they would have. I really looked at that Indiana game on the road, a team that could put up a lot of points, and I thought, they probably need to lose this game in order for Wisconsin to catch them. And then even after that, when you had Minnesota, who's has a good defense, who maybe could have a chance against Iowa, and Iowa took care of them as well. And now with 2 games left and one of them being Purdue, I don't see that happening. I am glad that game is early on, so we will know by the time the Badgers kick off whether they still have a chance, to win the division or not. And if that could. It's going to change this game completely if that happens. It's either going to be, a game for just bowl positioning, still a big game against top 25 teams. But I think, if Iowa were to lose to Purdue, going at Nebraska next week, that's a losable game. Nebraska's played a lot of teams close. They beat Michigan State, probably should have beaten Wisconsin. I think if somehow Purdue does upset Iowa, that score is going to come across right before Wisconsin kickoff. I think the crowd will get more into it, and Wisconsin has a real chance would have a real chance to win the division if that happened. All they have to do is beat Northwestern, and then they go into the final week with an opportunity. So, but I don't think it's going to happen, unfortunately. I think Iowa's too good. Purdue's not good enough. Someone asked or mentioned that Jack Sitchy's been playing really well the last 2 weeks. I completely agree with that. I said I kind of broke down some of his plays in our last Badgers football film room story, the ones we do online. Following that Maryland game, there was a section in there. You can look on madison.com if you want to find the whole thing. We posted it on the Monday after the Maryland game. But I kind of broke down some of his plays and I kind of explained why I really like what he's doing. And he's a guy that's a smart player, a guy that can get kind of get sideline to sideline, has been making a lot of plays. And I think he's been playing well enough. I think maybe we'll find out a little bit more, later today when we talk to defensive coaches and players about Chris Orr's status for this week. But I honestly wouldn't be that surprised, and I said this on Monday after the Maryland game, I wouldn't be that surprised if they just decide to stick with Sitchy as the starting inside linebacker, even when Orr's healthy. Not to say that Orr's played badly at all. I think he's played really well in his time as a starter, but I also think that Sitchy's played extremely well, and I wouldn't be that surprised if they looked at it and said, we actually like what Sitchy's done a little bit more than Orr. So, but I really don't think there's a drop off there, and if Chris Orr happens to be out another game or two, I don't think it's really a big deal for this defense at all. I may have missed one question in there as well. If I ever miss a question, you guys just can ask it again when I stop talking, and I'll get to it then. I'm not trying to ignore questions. I just they only show up for about 5 seconds and then disappear while I'm answering. So sometimes I miss them. Okay, just tweeted out our link here, so maybe get some more people in here on the chat. You guys got any more questions for me? Anything else about the Badgers or the Big Ten you guys want to talk about? Or any comments, too, if you guys just want to make your own comments about what you think about the team or your prediction for the Northwestern game. That's fine, too. For those just joining us, we've been talking about Corey Clement, Jack Sitchy, a bunch of other stuff. Thoughts on potential chaos in the East Division the next 2 weeks? Yeah, that's an interesting question because I was talking on our podcast this week when I talked to Teddy Greenstein from the Chicago Tribune. We posted that podcast this morning. You can check it out on iTunes. It's called The Red Zone. But I was talking to him and I said, I was kind of guilty of this as well. Some people were just kind of starting to assume Ohio State would be in the Big Ten title game, and I think people were saying, oh, the question was, well, can Iowa give Ohio State a game? But Ohio State's far from clinching the East at this point. Michigan still only has one loss in the conference, and Michigan State does as well, and they've got to play both those teams. I don't think Michigan State is really on par with Ohio State. I think Michigan State obviously hasn't looked that impressive this season despite the one loss. Had that lucky break against Michigan at the end of that game. Played a couple of other bad teams close before pulling it out. Pulling out a win. Obviously got upset by Nebraska a couple weeks ago. So I honestly, even though Michigan State beat Michigan, I kind of think Michigan has a better chance to beat Ohio State than Michigan State does. I do expect Ohio State to win the game this week, and then set up that rivalry game next week with Michigan. And all it takes is Michigan beating Ohio State in a rivalry game where anything can happen, and Michigan's the team that moves on to Indy, and Ohio State's kind of left behind with an 11-1 record. And I think it's possible. And I think Michigan's a good enough team, has a good enough defense to stick with Ohio State. Whether it'll happen or not, I'm not sure. I think Ohio State's still definitely the most talented team in the conference, maybe the most talented team in the country. Um, I think obviously they haven't played as well as they'd like to this year. They've played better than they did earlier in the season as of late, but and obviously their defense is right there, just as good as Michigan's as well. So I think that'll be a really good game. I would be surprised if Michigan State beat Ohio State this week, but not all that surprised if Michigan was able to pull off the upset next week. And if that were to happen, then suddenly you've got a Michigan-Iowa game in Indy with a chance for the winner of that game to potentially go to the playoffs. So, I think if I had to pick someone now, I'd still say Ohio State's going to win these last two games, but I think definitely a chance for chaos, like you mentioned. Someone asked who I think the quarterback will be next season, Houston or Hornibrook. I think they'll give the plan right now is to give DJ Yellens a chance at quarterback as well, even though he did switch to wide receiver this season. But I do agree that probably Houston and Hornibrook are probably the two best candidates at this point. It's going to be a tough call. I think it's going to be a really tough battle between those two guys. I think Chris likes both of them. I think he especially likes Hornibrook a lot. But will Hornibrook be ready as a redshirt freshman to be the starter? I'm not really sure. I think Houston's performance against Illinois, I know it's just one game, but I think that does a lot going into the competition next year, even though the decision is based on a lot more than the one game. Houston came in as a reserve and played well. I think that Houston has that tape in a real game, a real Big Ten game in which he helped the Badgers, win a game on the road in the conference and Hornibrook doesn't really have that. Hornibrook is obviously redshirting this year. I'm not going to have any game experience going into the camp next year. And the fact that Houston was able to go out there, and he made a couple, bad mistakes, but the fact that he was able to go out there and kind of the offense was able to survive with him, I think goes a long way. It's hard to pick right now. It really is, because Hornibrook, I've only seen him practice here and there, not really in live game competition. And if I had to pick one right now, I'd probably say they go ahead and go with Houston for his senior year and then move on to Hornibrook. But that's kind of a toss-up right now. It could easily go the other way. So it'll be an interesting battle for sure. This past season was the first time they haven't had a quarterback battle here in a long time. So it'll be interesting to see those guys battle it out in camp and see who ends up coming out on top. More one-year starters. Well, yeah, I guess Houston would be a one-year starter if that happened, but I think he still has, having that experience still helps, I think, over a redshirt freshman. How has Gillens been doing with the position change? As far as I know, he's been doing good. I haven't got a chance to talk to him. I was going to talk to him after the Rutgers game, but then Clement came into the room at the same time, and obviously I had to talk to Clement after that game. So and Gillens was gone by the time Clement was done. So, but yeah, I think he's doing well. He's obviously helping them on special teams a little bit. He's played some receiver, but hasn't been able to catch a pass or be targeted in the passing game yet. So he's at least contributing, and that's what he wanted to do. So whether he'll become like a great pass catcher for this team or not, I don't know about that. But I think he's at least giving them something. How has Walker Williams been doing? Somebody asked. I think he's been he's been pretty inconsistent, like a lot of the offensive line has. He's had his good moments, he's had his bad moments. I think along with Bo Benchwall on that right side, obviously the right side of that line was kind of a huge mess at the beginning of the year. They kept rotating guys in and out. Benchwall was hurt to start the season. And I think, Williams played well enough to kind of, secure that right guard spot over a guy like Micah Kapoy. Kapoy's starting at left guard now because of Dan Volz's injury. But I think if Volz was still healthy right now, Kapoy would be on the bench and Williams would be starting at right guard. But, so he's been their best option at right guard. I wouldn't say he's been, amazing or anything like that. He has given up, a couple bad plays, but I think the offensive line as a whole has improved this as the season has gone along, and they still need to continue to get better through these last two games if they're gonna, make sure they win these last two games. But I think they are getting better. No problem. You guys got any other questions? There's no limit on the number of questions you can ask. Is O-line going to be a monster with all these young guys getting reps, or is there limited upside? Yeah, I think that's probably a story I may do during bowl week at some point. It's just these young guys getting work on the offensive line. Is that going to help in the future? And I think it definitely will. A guy like the jury's still out on some guys. Obviously, I think Bo Benchawal is a guy that you can see the talent's there. He's obviously making a lot of mistakes. He hasn't been very consistent in pass protection, but I think the talent is there. He's talented enough where the Badgers stuck him into the starting lineup and kept him there ever since he healed from his knee injury that he suffered in fall camp. So he's a little raw right now as a redshirt freshman, but I think he's a guy that I expect this season to really help him going forward, and I think he's going to end up being a really good lineman here. As far some of the other guys like Micah Kapoy, I'm pretty sure he'll be a good player too, but I'm not as convinced as I am with Benchawal or somebody like that. I think Dieter's playing this early is going to really help him. I think his talent's obvious. He earned a starting spot early in fall camp, and he's been one of the best linemen for the Badgers this season as a redshirt freshman, and getting to play this early on in his career. I think obviously he's had his mistakes too, just like these other young guys on the line. But I think these are mistakes that he's getting out now, and a couple years down the line when he's a 3-4 year starter, he's going to be a really dominant player, I think. So I think overall, yeah, this kind of flux on the offensive line could help in the future with all these redshirt freshmen playing this season. Obviously, it hurt this season. Obviously, probably cost them that, and Clement's injury probably cost them a shot at another Big Ten title, I guess. But I think a couple years down the line, this could be a really good offensive line again. I think it's encouraging. I think it's not that these are just bad players they're throwing out there that are going to be bad. Always going to be bad. I think they're young guys who probably weren't ready this season, but kind of had to play anyway. And in a couple years, they're going to be good players. I might have missed somebody else's question during that answer. I just ask it again if you remember it. Got anything else for me? Still got plenty of time here on the live chat. For those of you who are just joining us, we've been talking about. Oh, someone asked about a Clement update. That's what I missed. Well, as far as right now, I mean, on Monday we talked to Paul Christ about. I asked him, if he expected him to be a full participant in practice this week, and Chris said he did. And then we get here Tuesday, the next day, and after practice, the coach was telling us he was really limited, or he was just riding the bike, and he didn't really participate much in practice on Tuesday, which obviously contradicts what Chris said a day earlier. So, I mean, like I mentioned earlier, I'm getting, the vibe I'm getting isn't really a good one. I really don't, coming into the week, I expected him to play in this game. I thought, had the bye week to rest. It's just soreness that he's getting over from 2 or 3 weeks ago. So, he'll be fine to play in this game, even if it's in a limited capacity. But after Tuesday's practice, where kind of the vibe I got and the fact that he wasn't really doing much in practice, I think I'd be really surprised if he played against Northwestern, and I wouldn't be really surprised if he is, if he's shutting it down for the rest of the year and just gonna kind of explore his options as far as the next level. So we'll have to just kind of wait and see. I mean, we're not going to know for sure until every Saturday when they're warming up whether he's out there or not. We're just going to have to wait and see because they're gonna keep it quiet on whether he's playing or not, and we'll get as much information as we can throughout the week. But I think we're going to go into this Saturday and next Saturday not really knowing whether he's going to play or not, and especially in a game like this against Northwestern, their defense is legit. Their front seven's a fast front seven. Like I mentioned earlier, they've got cover corners who are some of the better cover guys in the Big Ten. And if you can match up one-on-one, and if a guy like Alex Erickson isn't able to get open as easily as he has a lot of times this season, then you can throw that extra guy in the box. And running the ball becomes very difficult. And suddenly you've got an offense that can't move the ball and can't put points on the board, and you're in trouble. So, again, now that Clement's probably going to be out for this game, or at least I expect him to probably miss this game, even though I don't know for sure. I would expect this to be a really low-scoring game, a game that the Badger defense is going to have to win. And again, the Badgers haven't allowed more than 10 points at home in any game this season, so I do expect the defense to step up and play well, and I still expect Wisconsin to win a close game here, but that's kind of where we are with Clement. So, maybe he'll surprise me and play this week, and, maybe he won't play the rest of the season. I'm not really sure at this point. You're welcome. You guys got anything else for me? You can ask. We don't have to keep the conversation completely to the Badgers. We can talk about other things going on in college football if you want. Other things going on in the Big Ten or the college football playoff rankings or anything like that. What's your top 4 college football playoff as of today? Well, Clemson has to be in there. I think, obviously, Clemson and Ohio State both have to be in there. I think they've been good enough throughout the course of the season where, without having a loss, Ohio State hasn't really played anybody yet, but I think that'll kind of work itself out, obviously. They play Michigan State this week, Michigan next week, and then the Big Ten title game if they win those 2 games. So, obviously, Clemson's in if they stay undefeated. Ohio State's in if they stay undefeated. I think Alabama would be in right now. They've been extremely impressive since their loss to Ole Miss, and I think they're definitely the most talented one-loss team. And I think their schedule is, good enough to where they deserve to be in over an undefeated Iowa for now. Iowa had that impressive win at Northwestern, but outside of that, they haven't really had a whole lot of impressive wins. At Wisconsin was a pretty impressive win, but at that point, it was a Wisconsin team that was kind of not very good. At that moment, there was an offensive line that was still in shambles. Obviously, Clement didn't play. They turned the ball over 4 times. So, those are impressive road wins, but as of right now, I probably wouldn't have Iowa in unless they won, the Big Ten title game. Obviously, if they win out these last 2 games and win the Big Ten title and they're 13-0, then I would jump them over a team like a one-loss Notre Dame. I think Oklahoma State is a team also that hasn't played a whole lot of good teams, but they're about to. They've got Oklahoma this week. I think if the winner of that Oklahoma State game has a really good shot to get in, I think if either of those 2 teams win out, you've got an opportunity to jump a team like Notre Dame. So, I think the 4th spot is really hard for me right now. After those top 3, I think as of right now, I'd probably go ahead and agree with the committee and put Notre Dame there. But I think that a number of teams could win out, and I could look at a number of teams and say, if they won out, I would jump them over Notre Dame. So although I'd probably put, if the playoffs started today, maybe I'd put Notre Dame in there. I think they probably won't stay there. I think if Iowa wins out, they jump them. I think if Oklahoma State or Oklahoma won out, they'd probably be more deserving. So as of right now, I'd probably agree with the committee on the 4 that are in there, but I don't think I really, probably don't expect Notre Dame to stay in there. I think that winner of that Oklahoma State game's got a pretty good shot. Guys got anything else for me? For those of you who weren't here earlier in the live chat, I will let you know again about our podcast that we posted this morning. And we started a podcast this year called The Red Zone, and you can check that out on iTunes. We talked to Teddy Greenstein from the Chicago Tribune this week about we talked about the UW Northwestern game. We talked about Justin Jackson, his season he's having, and the Northwestern offense, and whether it's too one-dimensional or not to score points against this Badger defense. I talked to him about how good he thinks Iowa really is if they're a threat to a team like Ohio State in the Big Ten title game. He thinks they are. He thinks this Iowa team is legit and can beat a team like Ohio State. But I'm a little bit more skeptical that could happen. And then we talked about kind of the race in the East that we talked about, whether Ohio State has a chance to get knocked off by Michigan State or Michigan going into these last 2 weeks before the Big Ten title game. So check that out on iTunes and give it a rating if you enjoy listening to it. Still got time left here in the live chat if you guys still want to ask me any questions about the Badgers or the Big Ten or anything else. I appreciate the heart. It's a good podcast, everyone. Thank you. I really appreciate that. Oh, is that TJ Edwards' mother? I know you told me the other week that you get on the live chat sometimes, so I appreciate that. Thanks for the podcast plug as well. Okay, it's not, apparently, so. Anyway, still got some time left here. Still got about 20 minutes left in the live chat if you guys want to have anything else you want to talk about or throw out any predictions for the game on Saturday. I see our viewers have dwindled a little bit over the last few minutes, so hopefully we can tweet out the link again and get a few more people in here. But yeah, if you guys weren't with us earlier, I probably don't expect Corey Clement to play this week. I mean, as of on Monday, I really thought he would, and then he was very limited in practice yesterday, and would be surprised at this point if he played. I think it's going to make this game a very tough one for Wisconsin. I think it's going to be, Northwestern's defense, like I mentioned before, they're legit. I mean, they've got two corners who can cover as well as just about anyone in the Big Ten. They got a front seven that's fast, that can stop the run well. And if Clement doesn't play and those corners can keep the receivers from getting open, and they can stick that extra guy in the box, it's going to be tough sledding for Dare and for Taiwan Deal and Alec Ingold, and it's going to be a struggle for the offense. Like I mentioned earlier, this is going to be a low-scoring game. I'm thinking more like a 13-10, 17-13 type of game. It's the Badger defense is going to have to win this one, I think, if Clement does not play. So, yeah, if you guys got any other questions, just leave them in the comment box, and I'll do my best to answer them. We can talk about the Badgers, the Big Ten, college football playoff rankings, anything you guys want to talk about. I saw Jim just join the live chat. How you doing, Jim? Going to tweet out our link here to get a few more people in the chat. I'm not going to sit here and explain football. I think you can probably look that up if you're not sure. It's kind of hard. It takes me longer than 20 minutes to explain football, so don't think we have time for that. But going back to the Northwestern defense, I think Alex Erickson is going to be a huge part of this game. I think against Maryland, obviously the first half of that Maryland game. The offense was a disaster. They couldn't move the ball through the air or the ground. Obviously, without Clement there, it made it difficult. None of the receivers could get open. And then in the second half, Erickson was able to, use his precise route running to kind of get free on a couple longer plays, and that kind of got the offense going. And that's going to be tough against this Northwestern team, a team that has only given up one passing play of more than 40 yards this season. And Erickson's the guy that can get open. He's the guy that's proven time and time again this season that he can get open against most anybody in the conference. I think getting Austin Traylor back is going to be huge too. Getting that extra target in the middle of the field can really open things up. And those cover corners on Northwestern probably won't be covering Traylor. So if he's able to get open and give Stavi another target, another open guy to throw to, I think that's going to be huge for the Badgers. And I do expect Traylor to play. Last week he came out and said, he was definitely going to play. And then on Monday, Chris, wouldn't give any definitive answer. He said, he's doing, he's back in practice, doing well, but he wouldn't say he's definitely playing. I would expect him to play. He did not have a non-contact jersey on in Tuesday's practice, so I think he's probably a full go. And he's a guy, this is a good game to get him back, like I mentioned. If he can get open over the middle of the field and give Stavi an extra guy to throw to and keep the Northwestern defense a little bit honest and not allow them to keep putting 8 in the box against the running game. I think that could be a really huge thing for the Badgers. Nothing you guys want to talk about? Gonna maybe keep rambling here. What's up with the Packers? Yeah, we can talk about the Packers for a little bit. That's a tough one. I mean, it seems like Jordy Nelson shouldn't make this big of a difference for the Packers offense. But the Packers don't have that deep threat that Nelson provided last year, and teams aren't. It's a lot harder to beat. Coverage where there's one deep safety or man-to-man coverage on the outside when you don't have a guy that can separate and get open deep like Nelson could. Last year, whenever they blitzed Rodgers, Nelson, you could just find Nelson up top and for a big gain, but everything's getting pressed down because they don't have a deep threat, and it's making it a lot harder on Rodgers. Guys can blitz him more often, it's ugly right now. I mean, but you would think that even without that, Rodgers and the rest of the offense would be good enough to score more than 16 points against the Lions at home. So, I don't know. I mean, that's a tough one for me. Maybe they'll figure it out. Maybe they won't. There's a big game against Minnesota this week, though. For those of you who are just joining us, we've been talking about Corey Clement's status, how I think he probably will not play this week, talking about Austin Traylor and his impact, the impact he could make upon a potential return this week. talking about the Northwestern defense and how they're going to present a major challenge for the Badgers. We've been talking about Jack Sitchie and how well he's been playing. I mentioned earlier I thought there's no drop-off there between Sitchie and Chris Orr, and even if Chris Orr misses these last couple games, I don't think it really hurts the Badgers' defense, and wouldn't be all that surprised if the Badgers stuck with Sitchie over Orr the rest of the season, even when Orr was healthy. I don't know that for sure. We'll have to wait and see until Orr gets healthy and see which guy they trot out there, but I think Sitchie's been extremely impressive. You've also been talking about the race in the Eastern Division of the Big Ten Conference, whether Ohio State will get through these last two games, their toughest two games of the season maybe, and still make it back to Indy. And talk about the college football playoff rankings a little bit, where Iowa fits into all that. If you guys have any questions for me, still got some time left in the chat here. If you guys got any other questions, just put them in the comment box, and I'll do my best to answer them. Now, I know some people have told me that they've had issues commenting on these things, and I haven't figured it out completely yet. I'm thinking you may only be able to comment if you're on your phone, maybe not on a desktop. I'm not 100% sure on that, but maybe that's the issue. So, if you use your phone, maybe that's the difference. I will have to look further into that and make sure for the last couple we do after this one, or at least going into next year, that I figure out. Hopefully Periscope makes it to where everybody can comment if that's not the case already, but I don't know why that would be the case. But, hopefully there's not any issues there. And hopefully you guys enjoy these live chats that I do. Got about 10 minutes left here. You guys got anything else for me? Get a lot of people that say hi to me. Let's see here. If you look at, we talked about the offensive line a little bit earlier, but I will have a story in tomorrow's paper if you want to check that out in tomorrow's Wisconsin State Journal or on madison.com tomorrow morning. I'm going to have a story on Bo Benchawal. I mentioned him earlier a little bit when I was talking about the offensive line and how this year could help some of those younger guys down the road. But I think, I think he's a guy that has a lot of raw talent, and he's just learning how to kind of play on the college level a little bit. I think he's a guy that obviously was competing for the starting job in fall camp and got that knee injury. And you saw right when he was healthy, right before that Nebraska game, they stuck him into the starting lineup, and there was no more rotation at the right tackle spot, and he kind of held that job the rest of the way. So he's been, really inconsistent at times, especially in pass protection. And he talked to me a little bit about some of what he's been working on there. And I think he's a guy that, although he's been inconsistent this year, I think this year is going to be a big stepping stone for him, and he's going to end up being a really good player here at Wisconsin. So check out that story in tomorrow's paper or on madison.com. And then I believe on Friday's paper you can also find a story I'm going to write on Olive Sagapolu, a true freshman nose guard who's really stepped up and played a big role this season. And he's a guy that with Arthur Goldberg out, these past or the couple games before this Maryland game, he stepped in there in the starting lineup and played really well. So I was going to have a story on him. And then Saturday's paper, like I mentioned earlier, we're going to be looking at the senior class and everything they've been through these past few years. Obviously, to coming in here and came in here with Brett Bielema and won a Big Ten title game in 2012 to start their careers off. And since then, 2 coaching changes, only one more appearance in the title game, which was a 59-0 loss to Ohio State. So I kind of talked to some of them this week about, kind of the roller coaster ride they've been on, how much pride they take in kind of maintaining that, being consistently good despite the coaching changes and all that. So I think that'll be an interesting story for Senior Day on Saturday as well. You guys got anything else for me? Anything you guys want to talk about? Kind of a little dead here at the end of the chat, huh? Not as many viewers, less questions. Guess you guys have kind of moved on to basketball season, right? Although they had that bad loss to start the season, so that wasn't good. If you guys have any score predictions for the game, you can throw that out there too. I said mine earlier. I thought it would be probably in the 13-10, 17-13 type of range. I do think Wisconsin's going to win, but it's going to be a tough one if Clement doesn't play. And I don't expect him to at this point. So, see a couple people joining here. If you guys have any questions, just put them in the comment box. We've been talking about Corey Clement's status. Talking about someone said, I can't believe they're favored by 11. Yeah, I can't either. You know, I thought it didn't surprise me that much when I saw that because back a couple days ago because I thought Clement would play and maybe I thought that was still like slightly high, but I was like, yeah, Wisconsin will probably win this game by 10 points or something like that. But now that it looks like he probably won't, wouldn't be surprised to see that drop down. I think getting Northwestern at plus 11 right now. Can you speak slowly? Yes. Sorry, you know, I do kind of get in I do become a little bit of a fast talker sometimes. So I do apologize for that. Kind of have to slow myself down a little bit. But I think if you get Northwestern plus 11 right now, I think that's a really good bet. Obviously, I'm not going to bet on that game. You know, I cover the team, so I can't do that. But yeah, 11 seems like a high line. If Clement doesn't play, I'd be, pretty surprised if Wisconsin won by more than 10 points without Clement in this game. Because, like I mentioned before, Northwestern, has a really good defense, and if they don't have to, especially if they don't have to commit 8 guys to the box to stop the run, they're going to be able to do a good job against this Wisconsin passing game. Like I mentioned before, I think Austin Traylor coming back is going to be huge for Wisconsin. He's a guy that can get open in the middle of the field, that won't have one of these good Northwestern cover corners on him. So he can probably make some damage happen. Maybe he can make a couple big plays happen in the middle of the field. So again, it's going to be a tough game. If Clement does play, if he surprises me and comes out and plays, I think it's a different story. I think that 11-point line maybe not as crazy anymore, but it's not looking good right now. So yeah, if I was a betting man, I think that plus 11 looks pretty tasty. So I got a few more minutes here if you guys have any other questions or comments about the Badgers. Nothing else, guys? We burnt out here. Haven't gotten any predictions from you guys yet. Be a first for our live chat. Usually at least a few people throw out how they think the game will go. But I'm hoping, at this point, I'm just hoping for a warm weather bowl game. It's going to be nice in December, January if I'm able to cover the team in San Diego or Florida, Central Florida. So I mentioned before, I don't think Iowa has a chance of losing to Purdue, so don't think the Big Ten title game is in the works this year. Do you speak Russian? No, unfortunately, I do not speak Russian. Just English. So, sorry about that. But yeah, this is a big game. I mean, regardless of the Big Ten title game, this is a huge game for bowl positioning. Like I mentioned before, this could be the difference between a pretty prestigious bowl and the Holiday Bowl. And I do watch The Walking Dead. I do enjoy that show. But yeah, this game could be the difference between the Holiday Bowl and the Music City Bowl in Nashville, and that's a pretty big gap there in terms of the prestige of those bowls. And there's a lot of Big Ten teams that are going to be in that 9-3 range. You know, you got the top teams. Obviously, you got Iowa, Ohio State, Michigan, but then Penn State could still finish 9-3 potentially. I think maybe they'd have to upset somebody for that to happen. I have to look at that. And then if Northwestern wins this game, that puts them ahead of Wisconsin and drops Wisconsin to 3 losses with a rivalry game coming up. So it's a really big game for Wisconsin if you care about bowl games. But I definitely don't expect Iowa to lose to Purdue. But we'll know by the 2:30 kickoff whether they did or not, and it'll sure make the game more interesting if Purdue is able to pull the upset. But I'm going to go ahead and cut off a live chat there. Looks like we've gone about an hour. So I appreciate you guys joining me and appreciate the questions that I did get. We'll do this at least one more time after this game and before the Minnesota game next Wednesday at noon. So make sure you join me next week at the same time on Periscope. I'll talk to you guys later.